I'm Cynthia Snavely, and I'm your candidate for minister, and my pronouns are she, her. On April 11th, a piece titled "The Public Theology We Need Now" by William Barber and Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove on Substack appeared in my email inbox. Too much appears in my email inbox, but every now and then I actually find something that hits home. Barber and Wilson Hartgrove said in part, "The central question of public theology is always what God requires of us, no matter who is in charge. Throughout history, clergy have been accused of being too political in times and places where political leaders did not want to have to deal with the challenge our moral traditions offer. The compromise that Trump demands today, and that German Christians agreed to in 1933, has been made far too often in human history. It was the basic agreement between white churches and the Jim Crow regime in the American South, between church leaders and the Roman Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, and between many governments and church institutions in between." They then go on to speak about the Rankin Network, which I knew nothing of before. In 1931, a handful of clergy, scholars, and activists traveled to New Haven, Connecticut at the invitation of 7 African-American students at Yale Divinity. For a few days, the small group reflected together on this question: how could they practice the militant, nonviolent love of Jesus in a way that would bring down Jim Crow? They recorded their resolutions in a document they titled "Wither the Negro Church." Then they set about building institutions that could operationalize their vision. In other words, they were playing the long game. The public theology of this network did not make headlines for the next couple of decades, they write. Most of its adherents didn't get big book deals or respected teaching posts. Most of the group's energy was invested in a generation of students who these teachers and preachers believed could change America. Before Martin Luther King Jr., James Farmer, Diane Nash, and many others were leaders of the modern civil rights movement. They were students at the HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, shaped by this Rankin Network. There they learned a faith that demanded social action, the philosophy of nonviolence, and the hope that movements could change what seemed immovable. When he was martyred in 1968 after becoming the most recognizable moral leader of 20th century America, Dr. King was eulogized by his mentor and college president, one of the handful of people who'd been at that initial seminar in 1931, Dr. Benjamin Mays. Hopefully, we have learned from those who learned from the Rankin Network and from others who came before us. I hope we as Unitarian Universalists have a faith that demands social action, the philosophy of nonviolence, and the hope that movements can change what seems immovable, and the willingness to play the long game. One of our own, Unitarian Universalist minister Mark Morrison Reed, in his book, The Selma Awakening, says that Selma moved Unitarian Universalists to action. The blurb for his book on the website of our Unitarian Universalist Association bookstore, In Spirit, says this: "The foremost scholar of African American Unitarian Universalist history presents this long-awaited analysis of the denomination's civil rights activism in Selma, Alabama in 1965. Selma represented a turning point for Unitarian Universalists. In answering Martin Luther King Jr.'s call to action, they shifted from passing earnest resolutions about racial justice to putting their lives on the line for the cause. Morrison Reed traces the long history of race relations among the Unitarians and the Universalists leading up to 1965, exploring events and practices of the late 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. He reveals the disparity between their espoused values on race and their values in practice. And yet, in 1965, their activism in Selma involved hundreds of ministers and the violent deaths of Unitarian Universalists Reverend James Reeb and Viola Luisu. At last, this put them in authentic relationship with their proclaimed beliefs. In the back of our gray hymnals are these words written by Mark Morrison Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens, and our strength is renewed. I never dreamed that I would live through such a time as we are living through now, a time when the highest ideals of our nation and our religious faiths are no longer given even lip service by some of our leaders. This is not a time to keep quiet because we think religious institutions shouldn't be political. Speaking up against what is wrong may be political, but it is also what moral religious institutions are meant to do, responding with nonviolent resistance, not with guns. I was not there, but a good number of my fellow Unitarian Universalist ministerial colleagues and layfolk, as well as those of other denominations and faiths, showed up when another call went out to gather, this time in Minneapolis, this past January. An article by Ethan Lowy and Elaine McCardle in the spring-summer issue of our denominational magazine, UU World, began like this. In late January, a call went out to clergy across the country. Come to Minneapolis to lift your voices in solidarity against ICE occupation and the murder of Renee Good. Hundreds of Unitarian Universalist clergy and lay people from across the nation answered that call. On January 23rd, they joined the Day of Truth and Freedom, a nonviolent moral action calling for the end of ICE operations in Minnesota. Marching together in a tightly packed and boisterous crowd, thousands of people moved through the city in January in sub-zero temperatures, holding signs and chanting, "ICE out," and "No justice, no peace, no ICE in our streets." At the Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport that day, about 100 clergy, including about a dozen Unitarian Universalists, were arrested while protesting deportation flights. Members of my current New Jersey congregation have put together whistle kits to be handed out in neighborhoods with large immigrant populations. They include a Know Your Rights card, a card to be pushed under the door saying you're not open up unless you see a judicial warrant, a whistle, and a card explaining how to use the whistle to let people know that either ICE is in the neighborhood or that ICE is currently in process of detaining someone. We have shown up at No Kings rallies. Some have formed a sharing circle that they call the Getting Comfortable Being Uncomfortable Circle. They help one another to keep hope and to find ways of taking action rather than simply becoming lost in the slough of despond. As I said, I am currently living in New Jersey. I did not need to live there long to be told, if I did not know already, who the boss was. New Jerseyan Bruce Springsteen is not a Unitarian Universalist. He does have a faith tradition. His biography on Wikipedia says his music reflects a Catholic ethos and includes Irish Catholic hymns with a rock music twist. In 2012, Springsteen said that it was his Catholic upbringing rather than his political ideology that most influenced his music. He said his faith gave him a very active spiritual life. I was pleased then to read how Heather Cox Richardson ended her April 10th Letters from America column. She wrote that Jess Craven of Chopwood Carry Water today called out rock and roll legend Bruce Springsteen's opening last night at his concert in Los Angeles. "Good evening, Los Angeles," he said. "Welcome to the Land of Hope and Dreams tour. We begin tonight with a prayer for our men and women in service overseas. We pray for their safe return. The mighty E Street Band is here tonight to call upon the righteous power of art, of music, of rock and roll in dangerous times. We are here in celebration and defense of our American ideals, democracy, our Constitution, and our sacred American promise. The America I love, the America that I've written about for 50 years, that has been a beacon of hope and liberty around the world, is currently in the hands of a corrupt, incompetent, racist, reckless, and treasonous administration," he said. Tonight, we ask all of you to join with us in choosing hope over fear, democracy over authoritarianism, the rule of law over lawlessness, ethics over unrivaled corruption, resistance over complacency, truth over lies, unity over division, and peace over war. Choose. Choose hope over fear, democracy over authoritarianism, the rule of law over lawlessness, ethics over corruption, peace over war. Choose nonviolent resistance over the smell of gun smoke. Choose to bless the world. While there is injustice, anesthetization, or evil, there moves a holy disturbance, a benevolent rage, a revolutionary love, protesting, urging, insisting that which is sacred will not be defiled. Those who bless the world live their life as a gesture of thanks for this beauty and this rage. This is not a time for complacency. It is a time for resistance. It is a time for benevolent rage. It is far too easy at such a time as this to sink into a sea of overwhelm. Just when we think it can't get worse, it gets worse. But we are not alone. Not only do we have a whole association of Unitarian Universalist congregations working to meet this moment, we regularly work with others who share our values. On February 11th, a press conference was held to announce that today the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection ICAP at Georgetown Law filed a lawsuit on behalf of over 24 Christian and Jewish religious denominations, well, actually, they included us too, but and associations in response to the Trump administration's rescission of the Department of Homeland Security's sensitive locations policy that had restricted immigration and customs enforcement from conducting immigration raids, arrests, and other enforcement actions at houses of worship. Who was included in that suit? The Unitarian Universalists, the Mennonite Church USA, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, Church of the Brethren Incorporated, Convención Batista España de Texas, the Episcopal Church, Friends General Conference, and many more. We're not alone. And those were just lists of religious institutions. Maybe you, like other Unitarian Universalists, are members of groups like Human Rights Campaign, the ACLU, the League of Women Voters, Citizens Climate Lobby, the NAACP, the Poor People's Campaign. I'm sure you can add to the list. We are not alone. Remember the words of Morrison Reed. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be done, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens, and our strength is renewed. Unitarian Universalist minister Lucas Hagart wrote a piece titled, Democracy's Benediction. We are democracy, unruly, unfinished, unrelenting, people of rebellious joy taking to the streets, underground resilience resisting complacence, the pleasure of activism organizing into simple hope. We are democracy, people of principle taking on principalities, witnessing the worth of those called unworthy, justice just now gaining ground, integrity of interdependent existence extending living democracy in heads, hands, hearts. We know that democracy can die, ossify, brittle byproducts of bygone idealists, plotting politicians pirating votes, corporations cannibalizing our care for the world. Look, it can wither, distend, come to an end. Democracy, today we will love you alive, make you ours, make you thrive, and vote, and I would act in all ways, as though our hope is on the line. As Reverend Dr. Parker said, none of us alone can save the world. Together, that is another possibility waiting.